Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ibukunoluwa, like Claire as earlier mentioned. I'm going to be discussing about directors' duties and environmental sustainability in Africa. And the main goal of this project is to actually address the salient and lingering environmental problems in Africa, and also find innovative ways to exploit. Now, the main question this presentation seeks to explore is to explore the extent to which the corporate governance model in South Africa, Nigeria, and the United Kingdom promotes or undermine environmental responsibility. And subsequently, having explored these models, this presentation finds that these models by these countries, although progressive and impressive, is not enough. And then as a result, I'm suggesting a third way approach on how environmental and sustainability can be promoted in African countries. At the initial point, environmental issues, as we all know, have been addressed by environmental law over the years, but it has been subject to these environmental laws have been subject to so many criticisms. Like as we can see, that despite these environmental laws that have existed in 60 or in 50 over 50 years, the environment is still being depleted, and then there's still so many problems relating to the environment. And then this is mainly because when we talk about environmental law, is reactive instead of proactive. So environmental law comes in after the events have occurred. And at the end of the day, I've seen in so many African countries, for example, Nigeria, even when they tell this oil companies to actually like clean their oil spill, for example, it's still not as it used to be. So the main aim of using corporate governance as a tool to promote environmental sustainability is based on the fact that corporate governance goes beyond the anti-pollution approach that environmental law is using. Now, corporate law and corporate governance as a whole goes to the thinking of the directors. It tilts more towards sustainability development, because sustainability development is a way of thinking rather than just having laws in place to punish people. So rather than getting to the point where the environment will be depleted, and then the legal rules we apply, we go straight to ensure that when directors from the very beginning, when they are making decisions on their financial interests, they also at the same time consider environmental issues. And this is where corporate governance is very powerful as a tool to promote environmental interests. So again, exploring these countries, most countries have just newly started using corporate governance as a tool to promote environmental sustainability, and it is found that it's not effective. And then this research is going to use doctrinal model. It's going to use the comparative analysis between South Africa and Nigeria and UK. And the reason why I'm focusing on these countries is because South Africa has one of the most impressive corporate governance models in terms of promoting environmental sustainability. And Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, and lessons from Nigeria, for example, will serve as as shining examples for other emerging markets as well. And UK, as we know, similar to these other two countries, have also taken steps to protect the environment using corporate governance as a tool. So a brief overview has been given, and then the next stage is going to give you a context, like taking you back to Africa to see what's really going on, and why is environment so important, and what is the aim? Why is everyone talking about environment, particularly in the African continent? This is largely because we are the most vulnerable to climate change, even if we do not contribute up to half of the global carbon emissions, but we are the main people that are vulnerable to to environmental problems. Now, this picture shows a depiction of what's going on currently in some communities in Africa. We can see that the first one talks about how air has been polluted, and to a large extent this hasn't been addressed. Although the governments are taking steps, but I will say that it hasn't been enough to actually ensure that directors behave responsibly. And the second picture depicts how even children are affected by the impacts of environmental pollution. These children are seen swimming in polluted waters, polluted rivers, and they have no other option. They don't have good water, and due to pollution by these corporations, they have no other source of any other place to get water from. So they have to swim in polluted waters. And even women have been subject to, have experienced abortion. Why? Because they've been drinking from this polluted water. rivers, and that is their only source because they are living in the riverine areas, and even their major source of livelihood has been destroyed. Why? Because many of these communities, their major source of income is fishing and farming. And when companies come to their to their community to operate, they pollute all these things. This is one of the reasons why it's important for us to address these issues urgently, because not only is it affecting the health of citizens, it's also affecting the livelihood of members of the community, which to a large extent is going to ensure that these victims, like I will say, still live in abject poverty. And we can see that an average the Nigerian community, they live below $1 a day. So this is going to deteriorate, and at the end of the day, it's going to affect the whole continent, because there's high rate of environmental pollution, and is also spreading to other aspects and areas of their lives. Now, this brings us to the basic question: why is this still happening in this century, and what steps and what are the theoretical approaches that has been informing how directors or companies have been operating over the years? Now, this brings us to the corporate purpose question and sustainability discourse, which says that how have directors been how have they been making decisions, and what theories has been informing their actions? Now we can see that the famous one is the main issue of for whom are directors responsible. Now we have Adolf Bell in the 1930s, who stated that directors should focus on the interests of shareholders and should not be concerned about the broader stakeholder interests, including the environment. On the other hand, Dodd countered Bell's argument, stating that businesses do not exist in a vacuum. Instead, they actually exist in society, and being the fact that they are existing in society, they need to consider the impact of their decisions, not only on the shareholders, but also on the customers, the suppliers, the trade associations, the employees. So as a result, we can see that the firm in this picture, the firm is in the middle. So you can't, it countered Bell's argument, saying that you can't only be maximizing profit solely for the interests of the shareholders. You also need to consider the interests of the stakeholders, including the environment. And the 1960, Martin Friedman, who was regarded as the father of capitalism, tilted towards Bell's argument and saying that, why do corporations need to be socially responsible? Why should corporations pay attention to environmental interests? That should be for the government. Insofar as companies stay within the rules of the game, then they need not consider broader environmental interests. That was Friedman's argument. But interestingly, Friedman again countered what Friedman says, and says that in fact, directors should even ensure that none of these interests takes priority, because the argument by shareholder capital is based on the fact that shareholder interests should always come first, based on the fact that they put funds into the company. Now, this presentation is not disputing the fact that indeed shareholders are providers of capital, but then should they continue to should directors continue to maximize their interests even at the expense of the environment? That will not be acceptable, and even scholars like Freeman have said that in fact everybody's interest should be considered equally and on the same level. And so in this instance, Freeman argument wasn't strong enough to ensure that countries pay attention to environmental interests. Unfortunately, as we can see from the pictures I showed previously, most countries are tilting towards Friedman's approach of maximizing profit, because, for example, they want to provide returns for their investors. They want to be seen as doing well. So they just put environmental interests and external. Nowadays, ESG issues are becoming so crucial, even in terms of investing. So now it's becoming a very big topic. So we can see a situation whereby we moved from CSR, that's corporate social responsibility, we moved to sustainability, and now we are talking about ESG. All this concept to a large extent are the same. It's just like companies trying to ensure that they keep up to date. Now, unfortunately, these models haven't been really effective, as you can see that there's still much of environmental degradation in the society. And so as a result, my research is trying to prefer a new model, which is the environmental environmental responsibility model in the corporate governance regime. Now, here we can see that the environment is seen as the center of attraction. Now, one of the reasons why environment at the moment is seen as center of attraction is because we need to meet up with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2020, and without ensuring that environment is at the center or the core focus of board decision makings, we unfortunately, many countries won't be able to meet up with this target. This is coupled with the fact that many countries are trying to transition from fossil fuel to less use of fossil fuel. So it's important for this model, for example, seeks to address the gap by the stakeholder model and the shareholder model, saying that environment should be at the forefront, when directors are making decisions, and not something that directors should consider after they've made profit or after they've paid attention to shareholders' interests. Now, the next section is going to talk about how have countries, taken steps to promote environmental sustainability, and how have they used corporate governance as a tool. Like I said earlier, I'll be looking at South Africa, I'll be looking at Nigeria, and I'll be looking at United Kingdom. Now, South Africa has made attempts. Now, looking at the South Africa Corporate Governance Code in 2016, it's also called the King IV Code. Now, the King IV Code adopted the stakeholder inclusive approach. We can see from this picture, which is called the Ubuntu. Now, they drafted this code based on the African culture, which is Ubuntu. Ubuntu means I am because we are. Now, when we say I am because we are, it's based on the fact that, I exist because we all exist. So again, it's trying to state the fact that businesses, for example, using that picture, exist in society. So businesses cannot exist without the society. And if we don't have a suitable, if businesses cannot even exist in a polluted or a destroyed environment. So as a result of that, there's this, it's trying to, emphasize the fact that businesses and society, we are, they affect each other, and they kind of reflect on each other. So that's why South Africa actually, took steps. This corporate governance code is referred as one of the most progressive corporate governance codes in the world, because it mentions that directors owe their duties to the company and the company alone, and the company is viewed as a separate legal entity from the moment it is registered until it is deregistered. Now, the company here is represented by several interests, which include shareholders, employees, consumers, the community, and the environment. So we can see here that no one supersedes the other. As a matter of fact, the corporate governance code takes steps to actually ensure that everyone, including the shareholders and the providers of capital or the investors, are put on the same level with the environment, saying that no one should supersede the other, and this has been largely influenced by the Ubuntu tradition. And we can say that South Africa, one of the reasons why South Africa took steps to, amend their codes in this manner is based on their historical concept of the apartheid. So coming out of the apartheid, they took steps to actually ensure that when they're creating their laws, they kind of ensure that stakeholders are involved in and are inclusive as well in their corporate governance considerations. Now, interestingly, although it's soft law, but interestingly, the courts, the judiciary, has actually taken steps to affirm this Ubuntu and this Ubuntu motivated King IV Code. In this very case, we can see that in this, I'll just give brief facts of the case. Now here, the minister, the South African minister, urged companies to actually take steps. It was a mining company, and it informed the company that they should ensure that they take steps to treat the groundwater. Unfortunately, like same with how some companies actually exploit the laws of African countries. The companies failed to treat the water, and then the minister, went ahead and sued this company, stating that they have failed, to have regard to the interest of the environment and also interest of the shareholders as well. And interestingly, the court made it clear that they could have had regard to environmental interests. So this was a very shining light, and it gave hopes to citizens that even though this corporate governance code are embedded in the soft law approach, the courts are sympathetic towards the environment, and it shows that everyone is really interested in ensuring that directors pay attention to environmental issues. Same as well with the Bakoro and petroleum case as well. So this scenario shows that the codes aren't just stamped or rubber stamped legislations, they're actually making significant impact. Now, another interesting attempt, by South Africa is the introduction of the integrated reporting. Now, when we're talking about integrated reporting, is quite unique in the sense that it focuses on financial and sustainability reporting, and ensures that both reporting regimes, both financial and sustainability reporting issues are put in a single document. Over time, and in so many countries, financial reports are put in separate documents, and sustainability reporting are put in separate documents. Now, to a large extent, we can see that financial documents are always audited by PwC or EY and other, big accounting firms. Meanwhile, for sustainability reporting, there hasn't been much focus. But with the integrated reporting that we see here, we can see that now the country, through this code, is ensuring that, as the financial interests are being audited, at the same time, sustainability reporting issues are being audited. So this will make sure that directors take the environmental issues seriously in the management of the company. So integrated reporting has been a very, very unique approach by South Africa, and has been highly praised as a great step in the right direction to ensure that directors, again, ensure that they integrate sustainability issues in their corporate decision making. The aim of this integrated reporting is to ensure that it is embedded in the thinking, tries to change the thinking away of directors from maximizing short-term gains to focusing on the long-term business sustainability and also the long-term goals of the society as a whole. Now, I'll give a brief introduction on how the integrated reporting process works, because many people are not really confident with how the integrated reporting works. So the integrated reporting is not just like other reporting mechanisms, like I said earlier, that just says, report and then submit. This one will actually ensure that you review and you identify the material sustainability issues at risk, and then you move to creating an action plan, and then you move to the implementation and monitoring. So you have to track the performance of the key performance indicators that you have made, and then you now prepare it, to the company. And then, not only for companies to see, but shareholders as well also have the right to actually, be involved in how this integrated reporting works. And the next country we're going to look at is Nigeria. Now, we can also see that Nigeria, although not as robust as South Africa, has taken steps to also focus on disclosure. Now, when it comes to the Nigerian Corporate Governance Code in 2018, it says that the company's corporate governance report, on the sustainability policies, the social issues such as corruption, such as community service, including environmental protection and matters of ESG. So this is also a great step in the right direction by the Nigerian government. But however, note that these innovative attempts are in the soft law. And one of the limitations of soft law is the fact that it's voluntary, is non-binding. So when I say when something is voluntary, like we all know, it means that companies have that opportunity, they have that chance to not comply. And when they have that, so it's just based on the good companies, the ones that are naturally compliant or very passionate about environmental issues, they are the ones that will comply. Those that are finding their ways to they're still bent on making profit, may not abide by this. Why? Because it's non-binding, and also it's going to make those that are actually complying. Now, the repercussion of this voluntary mechanisms is the fact that those that are compliant will be at a less competitive advantage to those that are non-compliant. So the non-compliant ones will keep making profit, and then those that are compliant will be like, and they're like in between, saying that we are complying, and then the government is like, it's voluntary. So this might not really encourage firms to comply with it, because again, it is voluntary. Now, again, we know the market pressure, in terms of share price, in terms of stock market, and how in terms of shareholder prices, directors are always bent on maximizing profit for shareholders, so as to be seen as successful. So all these external pressures, even from executive compensation, most times we see that companies always reward their directors for increasing their share price. So in the bid for directors to ensure that they keep getting high compensation, they will have no choice but to keep maximizing shareholder interest, which to a large extent has been a serious impediment to environmental consideration in corporate decision making. Now, the next point talk about the hard law. Now, having mentioned the soft law, now it's important for us to see the hard law. Interestingly, in 2020, this shows again that the nation is becoming aware of the importance of paying attention to environmental issues. Now, in the Nigerian Companies Act, in 2020, everyone was excited that this would be a great opportunity for directors to actually control and ensure that even policymakers, this would be a good opportunity for policymakers to pay attention to environmental interests. So section in the Companies Act says that directors are to react in the best interest of the company, and in doing so have regard to the impact of the company's operations on the environment. Again, the company has missed the opportunity to actually ensure that environmental interests are taken seriously or environmental sustainability is achieved. Why? Because this seems like this is just the much criticized variant embraced by the United Kingdom. Now, in the United Kingdom in 2006, they took a step like this as well, saying that directors should have regard. Now, the term have regard has been largely criticized by scholars, saying that having regard is something you don't take seriously. Having regard has been argued as something that is seen as a secondary thought. So basically, the Nigerian government in 2020 is saying that Nigeria environment should still be taken as something that should be subject to shareholders' interests, which has been largely criticized. Again, the company has missed the opportunity to actually ensure environmental sustainability in the nation. Same with Kenya in 2015, saying that directors should also have regard. So we can see that these African nations, they are reluctant to actually address environmental sustainability issues. And the reason is quite unknown, but we can see that they are following the UK approach in terms of making sure that environmental interests are still subject to the interests of shareholders, which is still aligning with the theory I mentioned about Friedman. So capitalism at its peak at this point, because despite the fact that they had the opportunity, policymakers haven't taken that step to actually ensure that environmental interests are taken seriously in their context. South Africa, like we've seen earlier, in its corporate law.
Just 5 minutes left.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So South Africa, as we can see earlier, has also tried to pay attention to environmental interests by creating the Social and Ethics Committee. Now, this committee has been seen as a unique model in terms of ensuring that directors are being considered and the interests of the environment, and there's some sort of monitoring mechanism to ensure that directors take environmental issues seriously. Again, we have the UK, which these African countries have followed, saying that directors should consider the impact of the company's operations on the environment. So again, this same have regard has been ineffective and hasn't been able to protect the environment to a large extent. So having looked at this, we can see that one of the limitations is the shareholder model of corporate governance. The shareholder model of corporate governance has been over the years been a hindrance to the consideration of environmental issues. And also in African countries, CSR is viewed as charity, sustainability, or paying attention to environmental interests. If you look at the company reports, their annual report, they still view sustainability or CSR issues as philanthropy. And when you talk about philanthropy is something you do out of charitable feelings. It's not inside the management of the company. And also here, victims are unable to institute legal proceedings. So in case victims are suffering from environmental degradation, they are unable to institute legal proceedings. So now this boils down to the fact that why do we even need to have all these impressive laws in place when victims are affected by environmental or companies' operations on their health or on their environment cannot actually, initiate proceedings. So to a large extent, these regulatory attempts have been largely criticized, has been effective. Now, this brings again back to the ERM approach I talked about earlier, about the fact that, due to the urgency that we have at the moment, this presentation suggests that using the environmental responsibility model, interest of directors, interest of environment needs to be put before those of shareholders. By so doing, to a large extent, that will counter the shareholder model of corporate governance that has, been, embedded in the DNA of directors to a large extent, saying that, we need to consider environmental issues first, at least for the time being, to address the environmental crisis that victims are facing. So therefore, in order to achieve this, we need to ensure that we have the integrated reporting and all this, but this will not work in a shareholder model of corporate governance. This will work better in an environmental responsibility model of corporate governance, whereby the environment is put first before the interests of shareholders to ensure that sustainability is embedded in corporate governance. And again, this is how the framework works. Environment is mentioned, sustainability reporting is ensured, executive remuneration is also tied to sustainability performance as well, and board diversity can also thrive in the ERM framework. Thank you very much, and I'm open to get questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibukunoluwa. Thank you very much. That was really great, really interesting to hear about all of that in a few different countries within Africa and the comparisons to the UK as well. We don't appear to have any questions on the chat yet, but please feel free, everyone on the call, if you've got comments or questions, pop them down there. It's not a question from me as such, just a comment that it's really interesting and great to see the Ubuntu kind of concept in the South African code around stakeholder engagement and kind of participation. And I wondered if that's something that maybe other African nations or other nations globally are beginning to take a bit more consideration of, reflecting the kind of the cultural norms in the area that they're working in. I don't know if you've come across that or any comments on it.
Thank you, Claire. I think for now, it's still based on South African model. This is based on the fact that although the other African cultures as well, talks about Ubuntu, but they haven't taken steps to incorporate it in their corporate governance code. This is based on the fact that they are they are in the course of growing their economy, like they always argue. So they believe that if they try to incorporate the stakeholder model of corporate governance, that might push investors away. And at this point, most countries are seeking to desperately growing their economy, particularly as they are recovering from the pandemic as a whole. So even looking at the Nigerian, I explored the Nigerian culture and I realized that most of the communities practice Ubuntu. But the problem is, even as at 2020, policymakers have still refused to incorporate their culture based on the fact that they were colonized by Britain, yes. But over the years, they've gained independence, but they are still reluctant to actually, take that step forward and ensure that their culture is reflected in the drafting of their code and corporate law. So it's basically all about trying to grow the economy and improving economic prosperity. That's their priority at the moment, and that's why they haven't taken steps to incorporate the Ubuntu like South Africa has done.